little focus seemingly on the actual litigation where we continue to prevail with the temporary restraining order, the equivalent of a preliminary injunction, the trial date that we want. They're spending a lot of time on a PR campaign, which seems to not be working. They want to talk about what foreign regulators are doing. They want to talk about a streaming market that has nothing to do with our case. It is not in our complaint. They want to talk about CNN, not something that we're focused on. They want to talk about a $1.8 billion bond that they're seeking, and the judge already rejected a bond in the temporary restraining order that she issued. They want to talk about moving out of California when we're not seeking that. We're not asking for that. There's nothing about our case that would require that. They really should just focus on this litigation and focus on the rules of engagement, including for settlement. If they do that in good faith, and it's not hard to do it, then we can have some settlement negotiations at their request.
Speaking of some of that, I mean, here in Hollywood, a lot of the conversation has shifted towards whether Paramount would actually pull out of California. There's a lot of fear in the industry of what that could possibly mean. Do you think that they would do that?
I mean, only David Ellison knows that. And if he decides to do that, it's all him. He owns it. Lies at his feet, has nothing to do with our case. Our case doesn't ask for it, isn't seeking it, doesn't require it. There's no advantage for him to go to California in our lawsuit. He can't escape accountability. Our lawsuit will continue. So for someone who says he loves Hollywood and then would turn his back on Hollywood and leave Hollywood, he'll have a lot of explaining to do. And that'll be fully his responsibility, something that he owns. So, you know, I took that as a way to manufacture or invent leverage in this case. Because, you know, they've been losing in court, so they're trying to find some type of leverage. But, you know, it's not working. It feels like blackmail. I call it blackmail, and I think it's inappropriate.
Your case is all about keeping competition fair in California, right? So if Paramount leaves California, does that same question of competition still stand?
Well, the merger is what hurts competition. And, you know, there was a recent study that showed that, you know, 4,500 to 10,000 plus jobs would be lost. Nearly $3 trillion of economic output would be lost if the merger was consummated. So the merger is the threat to the economy. The merger is the threat to jobs. The merger is what cuts jobs and lowers wages and increases prices for consumers and reduces choice, competition, and quality. So that's why we sued, because it's an unlawful merger that has all those impacts. And if they want to generate some boogeyman by making up some idea of leaving California that they say would cause jobs, you know, that's on them. But that has nothing to do with this lawsuit. This lawsuit is challenging an unlawful merger that hurts jobs and hurts the economy.
And again, you know, before this goes to trial, if it does go to trial, do you see any room for compromise here? Like, are there any non-negotiables?
Sure. You know, we've always said that we want structural remedies to address the three markets in our complaint. They have a really talented team of people that they've assembled who know exactly what I'm talking about. They haven't proposed those things. They keep proposing what we call behavioral remedies, which are not acceptable to us, like a promise that's not really enforceable and is unlikely to manifest, to make 30 movies a year for 3 years. We had behavioral remedies in the Ticketmaster Live Nation that applied to those corporations earlier, and they didn't follow them. And so we had to sue them and win in court recently. Now we're seeking structural remedies, a divestiture of Ticketmaster. So they know that behavioral remedies are rarely adequate, that structural remedies, separation of corporate entities are what we're seeking. And we can definitely have a productive conversation if they're willing to put robust structural remedies on the table.
And just for the people that are watching at home, structural remedies, selling off. You're talking selling off possible studios, selling off possible news organizations. What are you talking about here?
Yeah. The separate ownership for in the markets that we're challenging. So we challenge, for example, the basic cable channel licensing market. And if this merger is consummated, these, the merged company would own 50 of the most sought after basic cable channels across the country. And that would create an unlawful concentration in the basic cable channel licensing market. So they would have to sell off a suite, a constellation of those channels to another owner so that they didn't have all those channels under one roof.
Attorney General Rob Bonta, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Okay. How long was that, George?
6:57 rough.
Okay. Yeah, the last part I mean, we had to, right?
Okay, we're about just under 8 minutes to the top of the show.
All right.
Future of everything.
Future of everything coming up? Cool. What up, chat? If you guys are watching, sorry, we just interviewed the Attorney General for California on this Paramount merger deal. Talks have stalled. They've been called off. We'll see what happens. Yep, let's do it. I'm ready with you. And tonight in the Future of Everything, Usain Bolt's running record shattered by a Chinese humanoid robot. Actually, not just one robot, but two humanoids have now smoked his 100-meter dash. Stopping his heart for robots. That's a whole other story. Janice Mackey-Freyer reports on the World Humanoid Robot Games out in Beijing.
Humanoid robots in China are breaking human records for speed, running 100-meter faster than sprinter Usain Bolt. For smashing into a padded wall at the finish line, stopping, it seems, still a work in progress. At the Humanoid Games, machines big and small also compete in events where they hit hard and jump high. The event, in its second year, being promoted heavily by China's government, and shows how getting ahead in robotics is a national priority here. A robot conference alongside the Games, offering a window into that strategy to turn the spectacle of tricks and kicks into a commercial industry.
There are hundreds of robot companies here in China making machines that can box each other or run faster than people, if that's what you need your robot to do. But the bigger focus at this World Robot Conference in Beijing appears to be on tasks that are, well, mundane or boring, even by human standards.
Yet none of what's on display in China will be finding its way to the United States. The Trump administration banning imports of newly made foreign humanoids and quadrupeds, citing national security concerns, with 82% of humanoid shipments around the world coming from China.
They have a problem in the U.S. building a resilient supply chain. They're very dependent on foreign components, and they want to reshore manufacturing.
While China is seen as having a clear lead in manufacturing and scaling robots, the technology, though, still flawed, with fumbles and flying sparks. A reminder that robots still have a ways to go. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
All right, so to run is robotic. To stop, though, stopping is human still. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gotti Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned to NBC News Now. All right, let me take a look at toss to Matt. And then what was the other change? What's a...
Copy, thank you.
Perfect. This looks great. This is really good. B3. Okay. Yep, I took a look at this. And I'm just going to add temporary. Yeah. And I think it's a plan to make plans, right? Or is it a plan to... Because they haven't done it yet, and that was the whole thing? Yeah. But I thought it was a plan that would direct state agency. Let's bring in Steve Patterson, who's on the ground in Nevada. Steve, what's it looking like? To do these lists. But
we know that Canada allows its...
With the plan to restrict
Canada
mail-in
will
voting.
match Washington's new
we're
tariffs,
saying that they're
dollar for dollar.
mail-in voting, where they would argue that they are not restricting.
And we'll break down the
voting.
latest with Canada in just a minute. But first, let's dive a little
deeper into Iran with NBC's chief White House correspondent, Garrett. Hey, Garrett, talk to us a little bit about the.
Well, Gotti, the D-Day of an economic offensive by the U.S. against Iran has apparently come and gone. And Scott
is the White House saying they want to restrict mail-in voting? Let's get a little deeper into all things Canada and tariffs here. Let's go to NBC News business and economy reporter Ali Kanal. Ali, good to see you.
They want to restrict it to
citizens, and then they've been making the claims that are, not in line with what we've seen. But this. You Okay, take a look. All right, 90 seconds. Here we go.
Position G, sir. To the open. There it is, sir. To the open.
Are we moving out of this position pretty quick?
You're staying here, and the lead goes right to the pre-tape.
Staying in this corner?
Yeah.
Ugh.
5. 2 to the open.
Hey, good evening. I'm Gotti Schwartz, and we start tonight with that growing fire near Reno, Nevada, called the Hawk Fire, that seems to be getting bigger by the moment, and it's ballooned to 15,000 acres since igniting over the weekend. It has now been declared a state of emergency, closed 2 hospitals, forced tens of thousands to evacuate. But even though it's still burning at this rapid pace, firefighters seem to be slowly getting some of their arms around it. Investigators are saying this is a human-caused fire, but they would not confirm if that means arson. Its location, though, on the outskirts of Reno, has raised concern for the over 300,000 people living there. And while around 42,000 people are under formal evacuation orders, authorities have suggested that another 50,000 in the area should also consider getting out. Now let's bring in Steve Patterson, who's on the ground in Nevada. Steve, what's it looking like?
Gotti, the winds have picked up significantly in just the last few minutes or so. Temperatures rising throughout the day. Conditions very poor, obviously, for fires, especially the fire that is now burning. Thankfully, crews overnight making solid progress. The containment now 27%. Firefighters keeping it a perimeter, doing a really good job of keeping this perimeter around city centers. We can't even see the fire. We don't even know really what direction it is from where I'm standing, which is good news because you can smell it, you can see it earlier on today. Meanwhile, evacuations improving as well. Now 23,000 instead of the 45 go now orders in this community. 40,000 people told to pack a bag and get ready to go. Those numbers have significantly improved. Firefighters are making progress. But the first thing I mentioned, these winds picking up, temperatures still hot. The fire danger is still very present here. It's still a dangerous situation, which is why they haven't lifted every evacuation order in this area. Got it?
Yeah, we can hear that wind hitting your mic there. Authorities have saying that this is a human-caused fire. Do we know what they mean by human-caused fire? Accidental, like a muffler, or are we talking arson here?
No idea. The sheriff, I tried to press on this, as well as there was a briefing not too long ago where they spoke about obviously this being a human-caused fire. They say it's under investigation. It may be unsettled, the word they used, for quite some time. So we're not sure we're going to know. The sheriff told me essentially this was like a ravine near an area where there could be nothing besides a human who did this. So it could be arson. It could be intentional. It could be accidental. We're not sure as well. We should say most wildfires are human caused, right? 80 to 95% of every fire that's ever burned in California, across the country, is because it started with a human. The other half, obviously, lightning strikes, other reasons that are naturally occurring. But the number one reason is humans.
And Steve, the Hawk Fire isn't the only fire burning in Nevada right now, right?
Yeah, there's a nexus of about 3 to 5 fires clustered close to where we are. Thankfully, most of those have significant containment. The bug fire did a whole lot of damage before crews got their handle on that. The worry, of course, is that this fire could spread, combined with those other fires, into what we call a complex fire. There's also worried about the fact that we're close to California. This fire could travel into California. Firefighters, though, think they have it well in hand. Again, it's pushing back away from city centers. The containment at 27% is a solid number, especially when it's burning off into vegetation and, again, away from city centers. So they think they have a handle on it. But I'll say it again, it's hot. It's dry, it's windy, we're surrounded by dry brush. Anything could change in the matter of just a few hours. Got it.
Steve Patterson, hopefully those winds die down pretty quick here. Steve, thank you. Meanwhile, from the White House tonight, the president in the middle of 2 massive pressure campaigns from the Middle East to our neighbor to the north. The Trump administration trying to squeeze the economies of both Iran and Canada in new ways today, as the war in Iran now nears its 6-month mark and traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, that is still at a standstill. The White House is trying something new by launching this Operation Economic Outcast that's aimed at not the Iranian regime so much as really countries and financial institutions with ties to them. Now, details are slim, but here's how the Treasury Secretary explained it a little bit earlier today.
We are launching an economic onslaught against Iran's financial connections around the globe. Our objective is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains this tyrannical regime until Tehran stands alone. Those who tether themselves to the Iranian regime should expect to share in the isolation of a withering regime.
Okay, so that is what's happening in the Middle East, right? Well, closer to home, the trade war with Canada is escalating too, with Trump threatening a new round of tariffs starting next year on everything you see here, just 2 days after higher tariffs went into effect on $20 billion worth of Canadian goods. VP Vance breaking it down this way.
We know that Canada allows itself to be used as a backdoor for Chinese goods. They treat Chinese goods more fairly than they do the goods that come from the people of Maine. But I think that we need to send a message loud and clear to the Prime Minister of Canada: stop taking advantage of the people of Maine. Stop taking advantage of America. It's over.
But Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, not taking this lying down, making it clear that they are digging in as well. Here's what he had to say.
Canada will match Washington's new tariffs dollar for dollar in order to protect Canadian workers, farmers, families, and businesses. The new U.S. tariffs are designed to hurt us and divide us. They're a miscalculation.
And we'll break down the latest with Canada in just a minute. But first, let's dive a little deeper into Iran with NBC's chief White House correspondent, Garrett. Hey, Garrett, talk to us a little bit about the economic outcast operation here. Light on specifics, but it seems like this is a threat against, I don't know, the rest of the world, too, right? Why should Iran be scared of this?
Yeah, that's right. Look, in theory, it makes sense. The threat here is that basically if you're a country, a company, a bank that's still doing any kind of business with Iran and the U.S. finds you, the U.S. won't just sanction Iran, they'll sanction you. They'll make it impossible for you to do business in dollars or in business in any of the global financial systems which the U.S. controls, which is basically everything. It's secondary sanctions. It's incredibly powerful. And the reason you don't hear about it all that often is because it can also be incredibly disruptive to essentially kick major financial institutions out of the global financial system. You heard a little bit of that from Scott Bessent at the very end of this news conference when asked why he didn't just take this step. He said he doesn't want to blow up the global financial system without a warning. So I think what we saw today was mostly a threat and then a little bit of a game of chicken here to see whether or not the U.S. is really willing to hit significant financial institutions with these kind of sanctions to choke off Iran, which this would do, but not without that secondary cost to the U.S. and to their other business partners.
And so when you look at Iran's big trading partners, you've got China, India, Russia, right? What are the chances that they actually comply with the U.S.'s demands here? And if they don't, what happens then?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's low. I mean, you look at a country like Russia that has already sort of sanction-proofed their economy. They can take some risks here. China really is the big one, though. There are different estimates here, but I've seen some that say as much as 90% of the oil that gets produced in Iran ultimately ends up in Chinese refineries. That means Chinese ships, Chinese refineries, Chinese banks. Does the U.S., does President Trump want to get into another economic back and forth with China, especially when President Xi is supposed to come here to the White House in a matter of weeks? The Iranians are betting the answer to that question is no. And when Scott Bessent was asked about it directly today, he couldn't give a timeline. He wouldn't say exactly who the president was talking to about this. So again, China's the big one. I think if you start to see the U.S. take action against Chinese banks or refineries or petrochemical companies, you'll know that the Treasury Department and the U.S. are serious. But up until that point, it's mostly a threat.
And when you take this in its totality, like the threat against Iran, the threat against the others, the trading partners, and then also the threat against Canada and all the trade stuff going on with our neighbors here, it seems like this is a threat in your enemies, your friends, and then everyone else caught in the middle kind of situation. Like, what is at stake here right now geopolitically?
Well, the future of the U.S. economy, for one, and the U.S. ability to make alliances and have and keep our friends. I mean, one of the responses from the Canadians today to all of this with the new tariffs on Canada was to say they're doing more to sell their goods in Asia and in Europe. They are deepening their ties with other trading partners to be less reliant on the United States. We've seen that in Europe when the president trashes NATO and our security alliances there. European countries doing more to need America less. One of America's sort of superpowers on the world stage, one of the things that makes us so effective as a competitor is these longstanding relationships we have with fellow democracies all around the world, which are being eroded by this president. That's not my take. That's just the way that this White House is doing business. And we know that also the Chinese love this because they also step into the breach here and say, whatever else you think of how we conduct our business internally, we are a reliable, steady trading partner. Our allies are our allies. We've got thousands of years of history. If you don't want to do business with them, come do it with us. The president thinks of himself as the ultimate deal maker and as someone who'll be able to wheel and deal out of these kinds of things, Gotti, but it's complicated and a lot of the rest of the world is moving on.
NBC's Garrett Hake at the White House. Garrett, thank you. And so what is Iran saying about the threat of being cut off from the global economy? Well, tonight, we're already getting a clear image of how Iran might respond here. There are reports of new strikes near the Strait of Hormuz. Plus, the Secret Service is investigating a new video out from Iranian state media that appears to maybe be targeting the president's son, Barron Trump. Let's go to NBC's international correspondent, Matt Bradley, to find out the latest. Matt?
Well, Gotti, the D-Day of an economic offensive by the U.S. against Iran has apparently come and gone, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, didn't really lay out what the sanctions would actually look like. And in fact, this big announcement that he had been planning on making for much of the past week turned out to be more threats than actually following through on all of the threats that he's been making over the past couple of days. It looks as though the Trump administration, when it comes to these economic sanctions, just as they had been doing with the military attacks and the sort of military aggressive side, have decided to make threats and then back down at the end, presumably to give Iran some sort of wiggle room to come to some sort of negotiated deal. But it looks as though the Iranians have really caught on to that game, and we can hear that from the reactions from various parts of the government. As with all of the threats that we've seen the Trump administration throwing at Iran over the past couple of months, they've kind of responded with a mix of sort of mockery and derision and basically just ignoring or brushing off the threats while also taking them quite seriously and condemning them. And that's exactly what we heard from the Iranians today. Masoud Pezeshkian, the president, said after Trump's announcement that the U.S. would need to correct its behavior with Iran, while others essentially said the quiet part out loud, that Iran has been under severe, sweeping sanctions. It was one of the most sanctioned countries in the world for decades, and was that until Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022. So it has already built itself a deprivation economy around which it can really survive for quite a long time and has demonstrated that it's able to do that. So that leaves the question for Bessent and for President Trump. If you're going to try to put more pressure on Iran through economic means, how do you ramp up and increase pressure when the pressure on Iran is already the highest of any country that is being sanctioned in the world right now? And that might be one of the reasons why we didn't hear a lot of follow-through when it came to naming the actual sanctions that the U.S. will be imposing on the Islamic Republic. Gotti?
Let's get a little deeper into all things Canada and tariffs here. Let's go to NBC News business and economy reporter Ali Canal. Ali, good to see you. Canada now promising to fire back with its own tariffs, right, starting on September 8th. What's that going to look like to people at home?
Yeah, Gotti, and the bigger concern here is that we could eventually get into this tit-for-tat trade war. I'll get into the reasons why that's so concerning in just a second, but Canada said it will match these tariffs dollar for dollar. They're going to target American products like steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, and electronics starting in just around 2 weeks. We did confirm that the country is expected to announce more details around those retaliatory measures tomorrow, so that's something important to watch. But this could be especially painful for companies that do a lot of cross-border trade with Canada. And think about those industries like automotive and agricultural, those states in the Midwest. This could hit them particularly hard. But the bigger concern here is what I alluded to. If we get to this tit-for-tat escalation, that could have real economic consequences. And it also creates significant uncertainty for all of these businesses. Now, as a reminder, the 50% tariffs that went into effect on Saturday, they hit a relatively small slice of this massive trading relationship, about $20 billion worth of goods, roughly 5% of all Canadian exports. But now with Canada retaliating, Trump is threatening to go even a step further, threatening tariffs on cars, trucks, auto parts, and metals starting January 1st. So this could be the start of a much bigger escalation here, Gotti.
Is there a pathway right now, though, to reach an agreement, or are those doors closing here?
Nothing seems to be off the table for this administration, right? However, there also doesn't seem to be any talks going on at the moment, right? It's pretty remarkable considering just last week we had the president saying he had a deal on the table. The two sides seemed to be reaching some sort of an agreement, and then talks fell apart really at the 11th hour here. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the U.S. came in with last-minute demands that were unfair and uneconomic, including, he says, efforts to restrict Canada's ability to make trade deals with other countries. That seems to be a big sticking point. Meanwhile, the U.S. says Canada walked back commitments, and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said over the weekend that there are no new talks that are currently scheduled. So as I mentioned, we've seen throughout this Trump administration and throughout these trade fights that there's always this path back to the table. But right now, there just doesn't seem to be any forward momentum. Both sides seem to really be digging in here, Gotti.
Yeah, what a stalemate. Ali Canal, thank you. And a major snag in talks over the whole Paramount takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery. California canceling a meeting with Paramount, while Paramount may be toying with the idea of leaving California. The state's attorney general called off today's meeting, saying Paramount was acting in bad faith, alleging the company leaked details of a meeting they had on Friday. But Paramount is disputing that accusation, saying the company, quote, stands ready to continue good faith discussions. Today's talk were supposed to be about a possible settlement deal after California and 11 other states sued to block that merger. Joining us now is California Attorney General Rob Bonta to talk more on this. Rob, thank you so much for being with us. Paramount is saying that they did not leak the details and they are acting in good faith. Do you believe them here?
Look, I don't know who leaked the details, but someone leaked the details, and that's just not going to work. That doesn't fly. That's not how settlement negotiations work. They have to be confidential. They have to be in a trusted setting in order to be productive and constructive and perhaps even creative. And when someone is leaking lies during that process, the process just can't continue and needs to end, which happened here. So they have an army of attorneys and an army of consultants that represent them. My guess is someone among that group is responsible for these leaks. They need to figure out who, put a lid on it, end it, and if they want to, really act in good faith and sincerely to enter into settlement negotiations. If they're willing to do that and able to do that, of course, we'll take their meeting and meet.
Intended or not, especially here in the land of Hollywood, like a canceled meeting sends quite a message. Why cancel the meeting instead of continuing discussions and sorting out whatever happened, however things leaked in those discussions?
Because there's rules of engagement. There's ways that things need to operate. You have rules in society, you have rules of litigation, you have rules of settlement, and they're basic. And nearly every attorney around the country can follow them. Paramount is the outlier here. They're the ones that are different, that are unique in not a good way, in not being able to follow the basic guidelines of how to enter into a settlement negotiation. And this is consistent, unfortunately, with how they've been operating in this case. Paid, unfortunately, very little focus, seemingly, on the actual litigation, where we continue to prevail with the temporary restraining order, the equivalent of a preliminary injunction, the trial date that we want. They're spending a lot of time on a PR campaign, which seems to not be working. They want to talk about what foreign regulators are doing. They want to talk about a streaming market that has nothing to do with our case. It is not in our complaint. They want to talk about CNN, not something that we're focused on. They want to talk about a $1.8 billion bond that they're seeking, and the judge already rejected a bond in the temporary restraining order that she issued. They want to talk about moving out of California when we're not seeking that. We're not asking for that. There's nothing about our case that would require that. They really should just focus on this litigation and focus on the rules of engagement, including for settlement. If they do that in good faith, and it's not hard to do it, then we can have some settlement negotiations at their request.
Speaking of some of that, I mean, here in Hollywood, a lot of the conversation has shifted towards whether Paramount would actually pull out of California. There's a lot of fear in the industry of what that could possibly mean. Do you think that they would do that?
I mean, only David Ellison knows that. And if he decides to do that, it's all him. He owns it. Lies at his feet, has nothing to do with our case. Our case doesn't ask for it, isn't seeking it, doesn't require it. There's no advantage for him to go to California in our lawsuit. He can't escape accountability. Our lawsuit will continue. So for someone who says he loves Hollywood and then would turn his back on Hollywood and leave Hollywood, he'll have a lot of explaining to do. And that'll be fully his responsibility, something that he owns. So, you know, I took that as a way to manufacture or invent leverage in this case. Because, you know, they've been losing in court, so they're trying to find some type of leverage. But, you know, it's not working. It feels like blackmail. I call it blackmail, and I think it's inappropriate.
Your case is all about keeping competition fair in California, right? So if Paramount leaves California, does that same question of competition still stand?
Well, the merger is what hurts competition. And, you know, there was a recent study that showed that, you know, 4,500 to 10,000 plus jobs would be lost. Nearly $3 trillion of economic output would be lost if the merger was consummated. So the merger is the threat to the economy. The merger is the threat to jobs. The merger is what cuts jobs and lowers wages and increases prices for consumers and reduces choice, competition, and quality. So that's why we sued, because it's an unlawful merger that has all those impacts. And if they want to generate some boogeyman by making up some idea of leaving California that they say would cause jobs, that's on them, but that has nothing to do with this lawsuit. This lawsuit is challenging an unlawful merger that hurts jobs and hurts the economy.
And again, before this goes to trial, if it does go to trial, do you see any room for compromise here? Like, are there any non-negotiables?
Sure. We've always said that we want structural remedies to address the three markets in our complaint. They have a really talented team of people that they've assembled who know exactly what I'm talking about. They haven't proposed those things. They keep proposing what we call behavioral remedies, which are not acceptable to us, like a promise that's not really enforceable and is unlikely to manifest, to make 30 movies a year for 3 years. We had behavioral remedies in the Ticketmaster Live Nation that applied to those corporations earlier, and they didn't follow them. And so we had to sue them and win in court recently. Now we're seeking structural remedies, a divestiture of Ticketmaster. So they know that behavioral remedies are rarely adequate, that structural remedies, separation of corporate entities are what we're seeking. And we can definitely have a productive conversation if they're willing to put robust structural remedies on the table.
And just for the people that are watching at home, structural remedies, selling off. You're talking selling off possible studios, selling off possible news organizations. What are you talking about here?
Yeah. The separate ownership for in the markets that we're challenging. So we challenge, for example, the basic cable channel licensing market. And if this merger is consummated, the merged company would own 50 of the most sought after basic cable channels across the country. And that would create an unlawful concentration in the basic cable channel licensing market. So they would have to sell off a suite, a constellation of those channels to another owner so that they didn't have all those channels under one roof.
Attorney General Rob Bonta, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. Gary, Indiana are approaching 2 weeks now without power. Shaquille Brewster joins us from Gary with the latest. Plus, the final witnesses taking the stand in the Lindsay Clancy trial, where things stand right now going into closing arguments. Also, if you see this QR code, feel free to scan through with your phone. You can come on through and chat with us all hour long. Let us know your thoughts. That'll take you behind the scenes, streaming on YouTube, TikTok, or Twitch. All right. 90 seconds. We got 90 seconds. Cool. How are we doing on time?
See reverses next. Should be, yeah.
30 seconds heavy? Okay. What was Liz's low-hanging fruit again? Okay. Okay.
1 minute back.
All right. Got it. So we've got Misty, and then we've got Angela. Man, and that Angela one is, how much time do we have in for the Angela one?
45. See reverser.
Okay. Jay Place. Yes, I have. I have many leather-bound books. Yeah, Jay Place, maybe we should, but you know, we like the behind-the-scenes messiness, but maybe we will. How many cameras are in the LA studio? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you count my iPad. I'll watch it every single day, SML. Nordiski. Hello. Hey, welcome back. Here are some other headlines we are watching tonight. The owner of the San Francisco 49ers, Jed York, was arrested yesterday in Ohio after police say he responded to an undercover prostitution ad. York pled no contest to disorderly conduct and possession of criminal tools. The NFL says it's reviewing the matter. And a father of a sailor on board the USS Lincoln was detained over the weekend by immigration officials. Luis Manuel Aviles is from Nicaragua, and according to his family, he's been in the United States for 20 years, has no criminal history. The Department of Homeland Security saying in a statement, quote, having a family member in the military is not a free pass to violate our nation's laws. Aviles' son, Joshua, has been deployed on the USS Lincoln for over 9 months. That carrier has been in the spotlight over reports of deteriorating conditions on board, which the Trump administration has denied. And in Arizona, haboob formed over Phoenix last night. Those haboobs are those massive mega dust storms where the cold draft meets the hot desert floor below. Officials always urge travelers to pull over and wait for a storm like that to pass if you ever see one. And a tornado swept through southern France earlier today, severely damaging homes. French media reports at least 40 people have been hurt. There are area thunderstorm alerts in effect. And Enes Kanter Freedom was ejected from a WNBA game last night. The former NBA player was sitting courtside wearing a T-shirt that read, woman, noun, adult, human, female. Chicago's Sky Natasha Cloud confronted Kanter before security tossed him out of the game. This comes as the WNBA has been the subject of debate over transgender women. Now to some breaking news. The Supreme Court handing the Trump administration a temporary win when it comes to mail-in ballots. In this emergency order, the court allowing the president to move forward with making plans that some states see as a way to restrict mail-in voting ahead of the midterms, but the SCOTUS stopping short of saying whether it's lawful. I know this gets extremely confusing very quickly, especially when you ask what this could mean for the midterms that we're about to see. Let's bring in NBC's news analyst, Angela Sinandela, to break this down. Angela, so what did the Supreme Court actually decide here?
Hey, Gotti, it is very confusing because the Supreme Court actually did not address at all the entire meat of the issue, the meat of the lawsuit, which was the question of whether or not the executive branch, the president, can actually interfere and make rules regarding mail-in voting. So what happened back in March is that the president issued this executive order, which was pretty much just these written instructions to his own agencies about things he would like them to do and prioritize. So one was with the Department of Homeland Security to start creating state-by-state lists of eligible voters. Two was to the DOJ for them to prioritize the prosecution of federal election officials who may be allowed ineligible voters to vote. And then three, with regards to the USPS, it asked them to create some rules around mail-in ballots, like adding barcodes, et cetera. And the real reason these states sued is because they said, look, the Constitution says that only states can run elections and that only Congress can adjust the rules. And the Constitution is silent on whether or not the president has any authority or any agency to involve himself in this rulemaking about elections. But what the Supreme Court did here is they basically said, you know what? We're not really going to address any of those issues. Really, what we're going to say is that this lawsuit just came way too soon, because in the theory of lawsuits, you can't really bring a lawsuit when there's no harm yet. So the Supreme Court pretty much wrote, this harm right now is all just theoretical. It might happen in the future because we don't actually even know what those rules will be that these agencies will come up with. So we can only figure that out once we get there.
Got it. So they can't sue yet is the top line here. But, you know, we've got the midterms right around the corner. Do we know if these are going to, I don't know, impact the midterms at all?
So that's the question that nobody really knows, because what it allows the president to do right now and allows these executive agencies to do is to try to make rules, to try to put forth plans. And then the idea is that at that point, states could jump in and sue because there might be an actual rule that you are really fighting about. But the real problem here is timing, because all courts historically hate to involve themselves in any election rulemaking or altering rules around the time of an election because it's just way too confusing to voters. And right now we expect to see mail-in ballots being sent out in a matter of weeks. So it is possible that rules could go into effect between now and November, and then they would have to stay that way for the midterm elections because the courts don't want to intervene too close to the elections, Gotti.
Bottom line, whatever happens next is going to be confusing, and we've got you to help us figure it out. Angela Sinandela, thank you so very much. And turning now to a trial that has really captured the nation's attention, especially online. We're talking about that murder trial of Lindsay Clancy, who both prosecutors and the defense say killed her 3 children. They are hearing their final witnesses before closing arguments. And this case is really bringing into focus the blurry line between mental illness and criminal responsibility. Today, the prosecution calling in psychiatrists to bolster their case that this was a murder/attempted suicide and that she was mentally sound enough to know that what she was doing was criminal.
So there ended up being, in my mind, 2 possible explanations for why she did what she did. The first being the acute psychosis with command hallucinations, and the second being this was a serious suicide attempt, and she wanted the children to be with her so she wouldn't be separated from them, and so they wouldn't have to suffer after she was gone. That was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God.
The religion that the defendant was raised with is absolutely an inappropriate area of testimony. It is to be stricken.
You see the judge there standing up, and that is something that has come up in the last part of this trial that has really thrown a wrench in things. Meanwhile, the defense has been arguing that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis, and she was hearing a voice that told her to kill her kids at the time was mentally incapable of grasping the legal responsibility. Let's bring in NBC legal analyst Misty Maris. Misty, great to see you. Okay, so going into closing arguments there, you saw the judge stand up. You saw the judge talking about how religion it does not or should not play into what we're seeing, and yet it does, right? Or yet it was brought into court, not just once, but twice. Is it going to be difficult to, I don't know, put that back into Pandora's box and explain how this impacts the case?
So it was brought into court twice, Gotti, and in fact, today, the defense asked for a mistrial when that particular expert, a forensic psychologist, brought up that same language again, mortal sin. It also came up with Susan Clancy, who was Patrick Clancy's mother, prosecutors asking that witness, do you know murder is a mortal sin, and getting an immediate slam of the gavel by the judge. That was about a week ago, that language being repeated now. So the defense had to ask for a mistrial. That is inappropriate and against the rules to ask about religion in the course of questioning these witnesses. It's a very objective rule. The judge declined the mistrial, but strong language to the jury. Now, Kevin Reddington, the defense attorney, made a comment that, he had to ask for a mistrial, but outside to the press, he believes that the jury will take the judge's curative instruction, which is what we just saw the judge adamantly speaking to the jury about and to prosecutors about, that religion is not to be taken into consideration in deliberations.
That is so interesting to know that the jury is going to have that resonating in their head, what the judge said and what also they heard in open court. I mean, framing to the jury is going to be everything here, right? It seems like the prosecution is acknowledging, yes, she was sick, she had experienced mental illness, but was not legally insane here. Like, where is their line of criminal responsibility? What is legally insane and what is mentally ill?
Yeah, so it's a separate thing from a medical diagnosis of any condition, whether it be psychosis or a depressive disorder, as the prosecution's witness had testified. The line is a difference between a medical determination and criminal responsibility. So the standard in Massachusetts is that the defendant did not know what they were doing were wrong or could not control their actions. So the defense has said that essentially this commanding voice, this auditory hallucination, was like a puppet pulling the strings, and that Lindsay Clancy believed that if she killed her children, it was morally good. Well, the prosecution says this was very methodical and controlled, and therefore she does not fulfill the standard for lack of criminal responsibility. And Gotti, we've heard from so many witnesses, so many experts, so many medical professionals, but it's all going to come down to the jury's determination of her state of mind at the time the crime was committed.
Yeah, and again, there has been so much noise about this on social media. I do want to ask, what are the rules for the jury? Are they allowed to have their phones and check things like TikTok or Instagram? I know they're not sequestered. It doesn't look like they are, but I don't know if it's just my algorithms, but it does seem like everybody's talking about this.
It's certainly in my algorithms. I think it's the only thing in my algorithm, but you're absolutely right, Gotti. This case has really taken off. You know, there's been people outside the courthouse in support of Lindsay Clancy, in support of the children. Certainly a lot of attention on this case. The jury is not sequestered. The judge every single day before court begins and after court ends reminds the jury not to consume anything outside of the courtroom.
Yeah, look at that line outside that courtroom and all those people there. Misty Maris, I really appreciate you. Thank you. And if you or someone you know is suffering or in emotional distress, you can always call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. Coming up, an update from Gary, Indiana on the ongoing power crisis there as schools open up despite thousands still living in the dark. All right.
Wait 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Always cold in the six. Hello. Great to see you. Yorkie. Anybody will believe anything sometimes. What's good? I don't know. This is a sad day. Yorkie, she admitted she did it. Yeah. I've seen a lot of that stuff that talk about the husband, and it just, I mean, if you've been following the case very, very closely, prosecution is adamant that it was her. The defense is adamant that it was her. So I don't think there's any room for that. There's, you know, the security footage from one of the drugstores. It just, I mean, like sometimes people online, you know, you see things and it's difficult to wrap your head around what happened, but this one's a really sad one. Yeah, me too. Good to see you too, Doreen. Thank you. Hello, William. Mark Owen. Mark, I know what you're up to. I think you see things very differently than the rest of us right now. Let's see. Yeah, it's, I mean, it is a tragedy all around, and I'm hoping that there's a societal lesson in all of it. Like sometimes we just cover these things that are just so difficult, and like the thing that, I don't know, this is probably just like rationalizing it, but like the thing that like, I do feel like it's important for society as a whole to look at this and
15 out, Gotti, standing by.
evolve somehow, so we'll see what. Welcome back. In Gary, Indiana, it's been almost 2 weeks after a massive storm hit the state, right? Well, still, right now, some people still don't have power. It has gone from 20,000 without power on Friday to kind of around 10,000 today, but the mayor of Gary is calling the situation unacceptable. And now Indiana's governor is calling for an investigation into the state's utility provider. NBC's Shaquille Brewster has more.
In Gary, Indiana tonight, fear and outrage boiling over.
I'm in a blackout, one of the worst ever for Indiana.
There's no gas, no power, nowhere to go.
As thousands are still in the dark nearly 2 weeks after devastating storms and tornadoes tore through Indiana.
This is day 13.
Day 13 without power.
It certainly is.
73-year-old Joetta Walker has lived in Gary her entire life.
I feel hurt because I feel like they could do better than this.
She's lost more than $700 worth of food and has been relying on drop-offs from family. Most concerning, she can't use her breathing machine.
What has been the impact of you not being able to use this?
It's making it very difficult for me to rest at night because the whole thing is you don't get enough oxygen.
Indiana Governor Mike Braun today demanding an investigation into local utility company NIPSCO, raising questions about its preparation for and response to the severe weather. NIPSCO telling NBC News crews are working 24 hours a day to repair and rebuild infrastructure damaged by this historic storm.
This is the kind of work that's been taking place here in Gary the past couple of weeks. Crews having to reinstall and repair lines through what you see are incredibly tough conditions.
Gary's mayor, Eddie Melton, says the ongoing crisis in his predominantly black city is unacceptable.
Is race a factor here?
I think race could be a factor in terms of
black communities, brown communities are often overlooked in tragic situations.
As of this afternoon, nearly 10,000 NIPSCO customers in Northwest Indiana are still without power. The lights just turning back on for Cheney Weber and her 2 granddaughters.
I feel like we still came last, so I feel like we at the bottom before everybody else.
Well, let's bring in Shaquille now to talk a little bit more about the growing concern out there in Gary. Lights are still not fully expected to be on until tomorrow night for some people. What's the update there?
Well, Gotti, I'll give you some good news, because this is the street that you saw Miss Joetta, who was in that piece, who wasn't able to plug in her breathing machine. This is the street that she lives on. And within the past couple of moments, power has been restored to folks here. We literally saw one of the neighbors coming out and dancing, literally dancing in the street to celebrate the end of what has been a long 2 weeks for that family. So Miss Joetta, who you saw in that piece, she will now be able to use her breathing machine. We confirmed that her power is on as well. NIPSCO, that power utility company, they're saying that power should be restored to everyone by tomorrow night. Again, this has been it will be officially 2 weeks since those storms ripped through. Tomorrow, they're saying by the end of the day tomorrow, for the remaining counties and the remaining areas without power, those folks should have power by the end of the night, Gotti.
Yeah, let's hope they're ahead of schedule, even though ahead of schedule in this case still means way over a week past when that storm came through. We know school started today, right?
Yeah.
But with power still out in parts of Gary, what did that look like logistically?
Yeah, it was an interesting mix here. You had the majority of schools, students were able to go to them. The schools opened 2 hours late. That was already days later than they were originally expected to open. At a handful of schools, I believe it was just 2 schools, one an early childhood education center, another an elementary school. Those schools were still closed because power wasn't restored to those facilities just yet, but the school district saying essentially that is a priority, getting that power back. It looked like we drove by one of the schools that was closed today. It looks like they do have power. At least the signs outside are now on. So hopefully that means more students can go back to school tomorrow. But just think about that dynamic there. You have some people who don't have any power at home, who don't have any Wi-Fi or internet at home, and then going to school. And that is the reprieve that they're getting, just adding to what has been a difficult 2 weeks. And just talking about a little bit about the complexities there of what families have had to go through. Again, hopefully that power will be getting restored, but this has been a tough couple of days and weeks for folks here.
Yeah, again, Gary, Indiana, like right smack in the middle of the country, dealing with this after so much time. Shaquille Brewster, thank you. And coming up, a look at recovery efforts in Colombia 2 weeks since that devastating earthquake struck. We've got an on-the-ground report talking to people trying to rebuild after disaster. But I do have 92% battery. That's good, right? Yeah. Let's see. I am back. What are you guys talking about? Make a wish? How did I end up at NBC News? Man, it's a long story. Have you guys ever heard of the Forest Fin treasure? Somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, there was a treasure buried. And yeah. That set me on my course to Los Angeles, which got me the job at the network. I'll tell you one of these days.
Standing, please. Here we go. In 5, 4, 3.
Hey, welcome back. It's been nearly 2 weeks since that powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake rocked Western Colombia. At least 329 people are dead, over 4,500 hurt, and hundreds are still missing. NBC's George Solis arrived in Colombia shortly after the quake, seeing that devastation firsthand and meeting some of the people behind the incredible rescue efforts. He's got more for us tonight.
Warning travelers at the airport in Pereira, Colombia. Rush for cover when the ground starts rattling. It's 7:34 a.m. August 10th, and an earthquake has struck the city, which sits on the Andes Mountains. A 4-hour drive south, residents of Cali run away from debris as the earth appears to convulse. The 7.4 magnitude quake has doctors pleading for help to evacuate patients from a collapsed emergency room.
Todas las personas que puedan venir a ayudar a la Clínica Valle Salud. Vengan rápido, tengo muchos pacientes en la UCI, en hospitalización. Necesitamos bajarlos, el edificio se colapsó.
Nurses risk their lives to bring preemies from the neonatal ward to safety at the Valle University Hospital, saving more than 30 children. Colombia's geological services show 427 towns have been affected. Homes and schools turned to mounds of destruction. The epicenter, San Jose de Palmar, a small town in mountainous terrain in the state of Chocó. Damaged cell phone towers leave residents unable to tell family if they are alive or dead. The damage stretches wide, from the Pacific Ocean coast east towards the coffee-growing mountains and as far south as Cali, the third largest city in Colombia.
Ya, mamita, ya, mamita, la saqué cargada.
Julian Andres Gutierrez managed to carry his disabled 84-year-old mother out of their home as the walls groaned. He said he recorded it so they would never forget how lucky they were to survive. His 87-year-old father also made it out. Angela Ibarba managed to get out of her building in a panic despite recent knee surgery.
Cuando pasó ahí mismo bajé por las gradas, pero todo quedó destruido. Todo quedó destruido.
The first nightfall masks the magnitude of the damage in the first crucial 24 hours, but doesn't silence the tension in the air. Volunteers mobilizing in a race against time to save more lives alongside first responders. By daylight, the monumental task ahead becomes crystal clear. We're talking tight quarters here, firefighters going in through holes like that to see if they can find any survivors. Any sound can interfere in the search. A volunteer who works in the music industry using her audio equipment to try and hear from any survivors through the cracks. Pero esto es parte de ser colombiano, estar aquí con el país en solidaridad para ayudar.
Sí, claro. No hay otra forma. No, o sea, nosotros no podemos casi ni dormir. Estamos muy pendientes de poder ayudar.
In Cali's Capri neighborhood, faint voices lead to this rescue. A baby boy pulled from the rubble of a 5-story building alongside his injured father. The rescues lifting people's hopes that more could be found alive. The operations only pausing when firefighters pick up any trace of possible life. And what follows is an action that speaks louder than words ever could. At any moment, what you'll see is hands being raised up in the air. That signifies silencio, a moment of silence, because there is a belief that there might be some voices coming from deep within the rubble. So it is important that first responders are able to hear to see if they can find anyone alive through all of this. In the first 24 hours, rescuers in Cali managed to bring out 37 people alive from collapsed buildings. The effort plays out like a carefully choreographed ballet of manual labor and machinery. Everyone here knows their role, despite no one giving any orders.
You see human chains of first responders and volunteers moving some of the smaller debris into piles. The objective here is to clean this road so that other big trucks can get in.
In the shadow of what was once Edificio Vanessa, we spot this group of volunteers, a group of youngsters that has been here since the building collapsed. A valiant effort that tragically yields little satisfaction.
No hemos dormido. Ninguno.
¿Cuántas vidas han salvado? Alejo Tobar saying he helped recover 4 bodies. John Solarte was among the lucky ones. He made it out of his workplace with an injured knee as the stairs buckled beneath his feet.
¿En ningún momento usted pensó este puede ser el fin?
Pues uno piensa muchas cosas. Al ver que eso no paraba, o sea, ese temblor, imagina que yo llegué hasta la parte del suelo y todavía seguía temblando.
While many livelihoods will likely be on hold through rebuild efforts, some critical structures lost, rippling far wider. Damage forced 4 medical facilities in Cali to close wards like this one at the University Hospital, pushing other hospitals to full capacity. At Our Lady of Remedies Hospital, Dr. Claudia Garcia says her team has cared for more than 100 injured. Dr. Garcia remembers how nurses and doctors put their own families' needs aside after the quake to help patients.
Nuestra clínica respondió absolutamente con todo lo que tiene. Aquí trasnocharon, se quedaron 24 horas, 36 horas. Creo que para eso estamos.
The clock is now ticking. This is the last 24 hours in that critical window to find survivors, workers, doubling down efforts.
At this site, volunteers of all ages showing up to help. 15-year-old Samuel was in a classroom next to an apartment building that came crashing down. The teen bringing drinks to rescuers.
Parece que todo colombiano que fue afectado está dando la mano de una manera u otra.
Sí, somos un pueblo y hay que estar unidos.
In the southern part of Cali, every life saved brings renewed hope. Firefighters working hard to pull out more than 1,000 furry family members like this pup. With 1,000 injured, the disaster turning into a test of leadership for Colombia's 3-day-old president, Abelardo de la Espriella, who moved to declare an economic emergency. The U.S. has pledged $26.5 million so far to help the new president with recovery efforts, along with earthquake-experienced rescuers from California and Virginia. Across the country, and in their eyes, you can see the sorrow, exhaustion, and disbelief at the hand their country was dealt. But in moments when it appears most bleak, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, a new hope emerges. The flag atop the debris, a beacon that draws tired eyes to it, a moment of solidarity, of humanity at its finest. The days may move ahead, but for many here, time has stopped. Recovery here holds many meanings, but above all, never giving up hope in each other. George Solis, Cali, Colombia.
George, really appreciate your reporting there. Thank you. And still to come, a robot that beat one of Usain Bolt's record-making waves at the World Humanoid Robot Games in China. Janice Mackey-Freyer has the inside look at those games coming up next. But first, you got to see this. All hail broke loose after 3 cyclists were making their way through some mountains in France when they got caught in a hailstorm. Riders took cover under some umbrellas or in hotels to wait that storm out. That leg of the race has been canceled, but cyclists will have the chance to compete again tomorrow. We'll be right back. Saw that earlier. Thanks, Todd. Everything good? Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right, guys. So in about a minute, 2 minutes, the rest of the show will continue with that Janice Mackey-Freyer package. Let's see. Oh, hell no, you'd never see me there. Good one. Good one, hi. Will Lisa be back on election night? I hope so. And how hard is it to read prompter? Dude, the hardest thing in the world. Actually, it's probably the hardest. For me, look, Hooked on Phonics did not work for me as a kid. Here's the thing, in the news, so early on, I trained myself to do, do you know about speed reading? It's this really, I wish I would have never done it. It helped me read books very fast, but it's basically like this different way of, you don't scan word by word, you kind of do this cross thing, and you could take in massive chunks of information at the same time. And for a while, when I was a correspondent, or just when I was reading, it was very helpful. But I had to retrain my eyes and I have to slow my eyes down and take in word for word. And it's very hard to keep my eyes going where the words are and not speed reading ahead, because then you find yourself memorizing like 10 words back, it gets very, very confusing. So long story short, for some people, it's really, really easy. For me, it's always been a struggle. Max Columbus, that's a story for another day. Hooked on Phonics works great for me. Doreen, that's really awesome. Okay. Hi. Next time I'll just have to like switch around the camera. I don't know if I can switch here. Yeah, I can. And then I'll punch in, and then maybe you guys can do some reading along. That'd be fun. You guys will do a much better job than I can do. I promise you that. Anyway, hasta la vista, everybody. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, George. Thank you so much. See you. And tonight in the future of everything, Usain Bolt's running record shattered by a Chinese humanoid robot. Actually, not just one robot, but two humanoids have now smoked his 100-meter dash. Stopping his heart for robots. That's a whole other story. Janice Mackey-Freya reports on the World Humanoid Robot Games out in Beijing.
Humanoid robots in China are breaking human records for speed, running 100-meter faster than sprinter Usain Bolt. For smashing into a padded wall at the finish line, stopping, it seems, still a work in progress. At the Humanoid Games, machines big and small also compete in events where they hit hard and jump high. The event, in its second year, being promoted heavily by China's government, and shows how getting ahead in robotics is a national priority here. A robot conference alongside the Games, offering a window into that strategy to turn the spectacle of tricks and kicks into a commercial industry.
There are hundreds of robot companies here in China making machines that can box each other or run faster than people if that's what you need your robot to do. But the bigger focus at this World Robot Conference in Beijing appears to be on tasks that are, well, mundane or boring, even by human standards.
Yet none of what's on display in China will be finding its way to the United States. The Trump administration banning imports of newly made foreign humanoids and quadrupeds, citing national security concerns, with 82% of humanoid shipments around the world coming from China.
They have a problem in the U.S. building a resilient supply chain. They're very dependent on foreign components, and they want to reshore manufacturing.
While China is seen as having a clear lead in manufacturing and scaling robots, the technology, though, still flawed, with fumbles and flying sparks. A reminder that robots still have a ways to go. Janice Mackey-Freya, NBC News, Beijing.
All right, so to run is robotic. To stop, though, stopping is human still. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gotti Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned to NBC News Network.